Hey everybody, welcome to an unexpected Transport Evolved hangout. Now, sometimes when we're very busy at Transport Evolved and we don't get a whole lot of time to generate a script and to publish a video, we sometimes decide to do a live stream instead. And today is one of those days. We've been very busy interviewing some really great people who have applied for the role of social media manager at Transport Evolved. If you haven't already heard from us, please check your inbox if you were one of the applicants. And so today, instead of working myself to the bone, I decided that I would have a live chat with you all about a really interesting and exciting piece of news that's just come into the fore. It is that Honda, Yamaha, KTM, and Vespa have all agreed to work together. They formed a new consortium that will standardize electric motorcycle and moped battery packs. And I think a lot of people are getting very excited about it. In fact, one of the people that we were interviewing with yesterday brought the news story up and was really excited about it. But I think having spent a couple of 4 hours thinking about it, I think I'm feeling slightly less optimistic. I think it serves a purpose into the future. And one of the reasons why I've decided to do this as a hangout was obviously so that you can all interact with me and we can have a conversation about this, but also so I can lay out just off the top of my head some of the concerns that I have about battery swap technology. Now, I know some of you are not fans of motorcycles. Some of you are not fans of two-wheelers. And we try and cover a wide range of different transportation solutions on the channel. And so sometimes we are going to cover things that some of you may personally not like. But I ask you to, if you still want to be watching and you still want to be part of the conversation, I think it's important to acknowledge that for some people, two-wheelers are a great option. I myself am a motorcyclist. I don't own a motorcycle right now. I probably won't ever own a motorcycle again because I have a genetic heart condition, which means it could be dangerous for me to ride unless everything is under control. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to ride them occasionally to review them. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to cover them. And so let's focus on this new consortium that has been established, and the goal of which is to design a core battery that can be swapped out between all of these different motorcycles. Motorcycles made by Honda, Yamaha, KTM, and Vespa. Now, if you are aware of the motorcycle industry, you'll know that Vespa's a really big name. It's very much focused on commuter vehicles, although it makes larger scooters that often don't get talked about all that much. But primarily, you'll see Vespas used as commuter vehicles, mopeds and motorcycles to get around town from point A to point B in less time than it might take you in a car, and for a lot less money as well. In some markets around the world, obviously, scooters are used as a primary form of transportation by a lot of people. In other countries, they're more of a hobby thing. People drive them at the weekend. They drive them when they're on holiday. And one of the bonuses of having something like a scooter is that you can park them literally anywhere. In a lot of countries, you can literally just park them at the side of the street. There's plenty of parking for them. They cost less to run than a car does. They're cheaper to tax and cheaper to insure. And you can put them pretty much anywhere, which means if you live in multi-family dwellings, in a tower block or in an apartment complex, or you're just you're living with a large number of people, you don't have off-street parking for a car, you maybe don't even have a garden that you could put a bicycle in. Having a moped that you can just park at the side of the street is a real bonus. But of course, with an electric moped or an electric motorcycle, there are challenges to that. And one of the challenges to that is that you obviously need to find somewhere to charge. Now, Gogoro is one of the solutions that we've seen, not to be confused with Grogu, obviously. And the idea behind the battery swap stations that they've used and rolled out in some countries is that you rent the moped and then you want to swap out the battery pack. You literally turn up at a battery swap station, you pull the battery out from underneath the scooter's seat and you pop it in the swap station, and then it will give you a freshly charged battery that you pop in. Now, this works in densely populated urban areas where there's lots of electricity, there's lots of a possibility for you to have a large battery swap station that will be well used. So the return of investment on that swap station pays off very quickly because people are constantly swapping batteries in and out and they're being charged up. You don't have to worry about having charging technology on the vehicle, which is a bonus. If the batteries are never actually charged on the moped, they're always charged at a charging station. You don't have to worry about having that extra circuitry on the bike, which can help reduce the weight. Now, obviously, charging circuits are not very heavy in many contexts. And there are some negatives that I want to discuss, and I think a lot of mainstream news outlets have not done. So, battery swap stations are definitely something I think that will catch on for mopeds and what we call underbone scooters. Now, if you're not familiar with the term underbone, it literally sits underneath your tailbone. The fuel tank in an underbone scooter sits underneath the seat, rather than on a motorcycle where the fuel tank generally sits between your chest and the handlebars. In an underbone scooter, the ones that you sit on, you put your feet next to each other and there's a cutout for you to put your feet and rest on, rather than a motorcycle, which you tend to sit astride. You have foot pegs at either side. You have a foot pedal for your brake and a gear lever that you operate with your other foot. Now, underbone scooters are very popular around the world. And so if you've got a battery swap scooter with an underbone configuration, that works really well. You can have one or two batteries that you can swap in and out. Honda has actually produced a prototype, which I saw at CES in 2018. They had a really nicely made prototype. It was called the ePCX electric scooter. That's the image that we've got for the thumbnail right now, although that thumbnail may change. I think Erin will probably make me a new one tomorrow when she's back in the office. But that was effectively a maxi scooter design, which was probably the equivalent of, say, a 250cc motorbike or moped. Automatic, obviously, because it's electric, you have to worry about gear changing and you don't have to worry about filling it up with fuel. You just have to swap the batteries out. In an urban environment, that works very well. But those little batteries tend to have maybe 1 to 3 kilowatt hours of power that you can pull out and drop into a swap station, and then you put another module in. And here comes the challenge, I think, to the idea of battery swap motorcycles. They work very well in an urban environment for delivery riders, your pizza delivery guys or girls, your couriers who are zimming around town and cannot afford to have a downtime in between deliveries, and so they'll stop at a swap station, pull out a battery, swap it over, and then they're on their way. They don't have to waste their time worrying about charging. And for delivery service industries, that is golden. You're only ever going to be probably a couple of miles away from a battery swap station, and those vehicles probably have a real world range of somewhere in the city environment of somewhere between, say, let's pick out a figure, let's say 80 to 100 kilometers per charge, which is what, 50 to 75, 50 miles to 60 miles per charge. Now, in that situation, the batteries are lightweight. They are modular. You can swap them in and you can switch them over, and that's great. But where they're not going to have a really good future, I feel, is in the serious sports side of electric motorcycles. I can see battery swapping being popular in certain types of motorcycle sports. So, for example, scramblers. They're going to have really short races where the bikes are optimized for speed. They're optimized for torque, rather than speed. So they have a lot of torque, so they can accelerate quickly. They can get over the jumps. and trialing, where the weight of the vehicle is absolutely paramount to you being able to jump over the obstacles, you being able to pull off any tricks that you may want to do. And so at that point, having a battery swap technology for any kind of trails bike is going to be a killer application, especially if you can have a mobile charging unit maybe back with your team. If you've got a trailer that you've brought all your bikes in, or maybe you've got a pickup truck that's got a charging station in the back with a half dozen battery swap stations, you could definitely go through an entire day's worth of racing and not worry about having to stop and recharge. And that would put you on parity with gas bikes, with two-stroke bikes, with small capacity four-stroke bikes. And that point, yes, I can see definitely that having an advantage. Let's not forget, Zero Motorcycles, that is, makes a motorcycle that is designed to have battery swap capabilities. The FX is a bike that you can literally swap the batteries out of. It's a little bit clunky, but you can do it. And obviously they make a road legal version. And the benefits of that, if you live in an apartment complex or anything else, is that you can literally park your bike up at the end of the day if you've got a short commute, pull the battery pack out of the bike and carry it upstairs. But the challenge is with larger bikes. I'm talking about your cruiser style bikes. I'm talking about your dual sport bikes. I'm talking about your super sports and any other type of bike that you would want to ride for more than about 10 to 20 minutes at a time. If you're commuting to and from work, most people live within 20 minutes of driving of work on a moped, on a motorbike, a lightweight one. You can often get there quicker than you could in a car, especially if you live in a country where lane splitting is legal, such as the UK. I used to save literally hours a week commuting on a motorbike. I used to have a motorbike that I would ride to the schools that I used to teach music at. And in the rush hour, it was quicker for me, even though I had to put all my motorcycle gear on, and put all my gear on my back. It was still quicker for me to gear up, ride to where I was going, teach, and come home. It was for me to get up actually earlier in the day, pack my car up, sit in traffic for literally 45 minutes both ways. It was quicker and easier for me to use a motorcycle. If you live in California, if you are in the Bay Area of California, if you're in LA, you will know that commuting on a motorcycle, while it can be risky, is quicker in terms of your time because you can filter in between the traffic. Now, other states don't have the ability to, it's illegal to filter and lane split. I know that in Oregon, for example, lane splitting is something that has been frowned upon, and they just haven't got around to actually passing legislation to make lane splitting legal. They've tried a couple of times, but they have failed. So if you're doing commuting, these battery swaps are going to be great. But let's talk about some of the bigger, more expensive motorcycles, 15 to 20,000 US dollars, the ones that are primarily used either by serious motorcyclists or by people who want a fun thing. And I would argue that a lot of people who own motorcycles at that price point fit into one of those two categories. They're either a hardened motorcyclist who rides day in and day out. They maybe have a longer commute. They have that rather than a main car. They might have a car, but their motorcycle is their primary form of transport. And those that are just riding for fun at the weekend. Both of those groups of people are not really going to be able to make use of battery swapping. And here is why. Because these battery swap packs require an external casing around the battery to keep them safe, they're going to require internal circuitry inside those modules to make sure that each module communicates with each motorbike properly, and that they have their internal battery management system within that unit rather than on the bike as a whole. That unit is going to be a lot more, have a lot more volume for your given capacity than if the battery pack lives on the bike and you've been able to squeeze that battery into every conceivable space. You only have to look at how the battery packs fit in something like the Energica SS9 or the new Zero SRF or SRS. Those battery packs are packed in really tightly, and that's because they are high capacity battery packs. They are talking of in excess of 15 kilowatt hours of power. And if you think about that, that's heavy. Anybody who has ridden any of the Energica bikes with decent range, anyone who's riding the Zero, the kind of what I call the grown-up Zeros, and that's not disparaging of anybody who rides the FX or the FXS or anything like that. I'm talking about the bigger bikes, so the dual sport variant. So that's the Zero DS, the DSR, the DSR, the DS, the DSR, the S, the SRF, and the SRS. Those are all big bikes with big battery packs that are capable of riding up to 70, 80, 90, 100 miles in town conditions. Some can do 200 miles. I believe the DSR has a range in excess of 200 miles in the city. And so for those motorcycles, being able to swap the battery pack out and put a new one in is not going to be a possibility, because the reason those bikes have got such large capacities and they can do such insane distances is because everything is squeezed in to the frame of the bike. And having ridden all of those bikes, I can tell you there's a lot of weight there. And I know personally that I wouldn't be able to lift out a battery pack. The SS9, for example, has, I believe it has 600 and some pounds. The bike is a heavy bike. And imagine having to lift out something that's the equivalent of a 1 liter engine and oil tank and fuel tank out to charge. You're just not going to do that. So I think we have to be careful when we're talking about this conglomerate of motorcycle manufacturers who want to do battery swapping. And I think we have to be careful that they are, yes, talking about commuter bikes, and that's fantastic. Mopeds, 125 equivalents, maybe even a 250 equivalent. That would be delightful. But for people who live in more rural areas, people who want to go touring on their motorcycles, people who want to, for example, jump on the bike and head up to Seattle for the weekend from Portland, they are not going to be those types of motorcyclists, and they're not going to be able to make use of battery swap technology. The challenge, though, with motorcycles is charging them at high current is also a problem, because the battery packs have minimal thermal isolation, minimal thermal battery management, and so a lot of motorcycles don't charge particularly quickly. Some motorcycle companies, like Zero, for example, flat out refuse. If you put too many chargers on your bike and you constantly try and rapid charge it beyond their recommendations, you are going to be in trouble. So as some of you are noting in the chat room, I think this is something we should celebrate. And I think this is going to be revolutionary in a lot of markets around the world. But it's also important to remember that this is not a one-stop shop. You're not going to suddenly see a BMW GS equivalent with swappable batteries. It's just not going to happen unless we can see a battery swap station which operates in a similar way to, say, Better Place or Tesla's battery swap for the limited time that it did it, or the Niro battery swap station, where you come up with your motorcycle, you ride in, you put it on the stand, then a robotic system comes over and takes your motorcycle, swaps the battery pack out automatically, and then puts it back in. But again, that is going to be a very different type of battery swap experience to lifting out a portable 1 or 2 kilowatt hour battery, plopping it in a swap station, and then putting another one in. So let's delve into the chat room and see how some of you are reacting to that news. I like your reviews of the Zero bike. I love the Zeros. I would own a Zero if I could. I can't afford one at the moment. As I said earlier, I have a heart condition, which means that I could potentially pass out, or have a problem with my heart that would mean that it would be dangerous, more dangerous on a motorcycle than in a car. Let's put it like that. Some of you are talking about bicycles, electric bicycles, and I think electric bicycles and electric swap stations for electric bicycles are also really, really important. I'm not going to go into any politics. I've seen some politics flashing through here. So bike riders will fight you on EV bikes because no one will hear them, especially car drivers. They want illegal screaming mufflers, even when 90% of them will end up in hospital due to hearing loss, or ENT hospital, ear, nose, and throat. I believe that it's funny. A lot of motorcyclists that I know who ride regularly are less worried about loud pipes and more worried about ATGAT and being visible and riding defensively. Those who are fixated, and this is my personal opinion, I want to reiterate that, those who are transfixed on loud pipes are often people, I feel, who are risky riders, who will take risks and rely on the noise of their bike to get them out of a mischievous position. Having ridden some pretty loud bikes in my time, I will say that the two close shaves that I personally got into happened when I was riding a large, powerful, noisy motorbike. I was once in Michigan riding a bike that I'd borrowed from someone literally for the day. It wasn't particularly loud, but it was a gas bike. It was bright yellow. And I tried to overtake someone. It was going into the fast lane. I did my lifesaver. I signaled, checked my mirror, did a second lifesaver, and the car that was behind me, a long way behind me, had decided to significantly speed up in order to get to me before I pulled out. And had it not been for my second lifesaver, I'd already kind of committed to moving over. I did my lifesaver, checked, moved, and they came out of my blind spot. But because I was monitoring it, because I knew where they were, I was able to move back into position. And I would argue that defensive riding techniques can make up for loud pipes in a lot of ways. When you are riding a motorcycle, the kind of the thing that goes through your mind, or should go through your mind, is one, everyone is going to hit me. And so you have to take steps to make sure that nobody hits you. And two, expect the unexpected. And three, expect that nobody can see you. Even if you are riding on a bright yellow Japanese motorcycle in bright reflective gear, they are still not going to see you because they don't look for motorcycles. And so you have to ride hellishly defensively all the time. And if you don't, that's when you get into a problem. Loud pipes are a misnomer. I've always felt more safe. I'm just going to come out and say it. I've always felt more safe on an electric motorcycle than I have anything else, provided that electric motorcycle has bucket loads of torque and can easily do the limit. I've been in a couple of situations on an electric motorcycle before. Year before last, I was doing a test ride of the SS9. Had it for a week. I was on Interstate 5 heading south towards Salem in Oregon. And there was somebody who had decided that they were going to try and cut in front of me to then overtake a cement lorry. And I knew that there wasn't enough space in that gap, and they were going to try and pull me in, and were going to try and push me out to get in to then get around. And in the split second that I had to decide how I was going to react to that, I knew that there was nobody to my left immediately because I'd literally just done a lifesaver. I literally leaned over and opened the bike up because I didn't have to worry about gears. I didn't have to drop a gear on a traditional gas motorbike. Unless you have a super torquey bike, like the BMW engines, the Boxer engines are notoriously brilliant, wonderfully brilliant. The Boxer engines that BMW has and its range of bikes have so much torque. You can be in second or third gear, open it up, and it will just go, and it will respond pretty instantly. But on an electric bike, if it's a high power, high torque bike, you literally just move your right hand and the bike goes zoom, and that's it. And you're good. You open it up and wham. That is it feels inherently safer for me riding in that regard than it would for any other setup. Does that make sense? It feels that is kind of that is the better solution. Let's read. Could these batteries be used for other applications? Absolutely. So if you are looking at electric boats, if you are looking at electric quads, ATVs, little things that you ride around the farm, you could use these battery swaps again in a situation where you had a finite range and you were okay with that finite range because really you wanted the utility more than anything else. And in that situation, battery swaps are absolutely a godsend because, for example, there are a lot of YouTubers who have small holdings, sustainability, off-grid, whatever. And a couple of them recently have been saying, look, I've been moving to golf carts to go around the farm on because I've got a solar panel on the roof of the golf cart. I can trickle charge the batteries when I'm not using it. Most of the time it's just sat there doing nothing. But if I've got to take feed to the animals or I've got to go to the another part of the farm, a sizable distance away, rather than jump in a massive pickup truck and damage the ground, I'm just going to take a golf cart with low pressure tires. So the big bulb tires. It's not going to damage the ground. It's not going to get bogged down. I can go out there. I've got electric and we are fine. And the same thing, you could use these battery swaps for that as well. Modular battery swaps, you just chuck them in and jobs are good. Chris says, I don't see the point of swapping a battery for an electric motorcycle unless you're just renting the battery for each use. You might get a bad or degraded battery. You are totally right. And there are some differences there to that. Personally, I like to have my own battery. I know how I treat my battery and my car. All of the cars I've owned, I've known what those batteries have been like. I've been prepared to have those batteries in a functioning state. I know that I've not mistreated them. And that means that I'm less likely to worry about the battery's health. I'm more likely to keep the car for a longer period of time. And so for consumers who have a predictable daily commute and they have somewhere to charge, I don't know what my webcam's doing, I do apologize. If they have a predictable daily commute and they don't have to charge, they do have to charge, but they can charge every day at home, then there's not a challenge that requires them to have battery swaps. So for example, let's say I live in central London, or rather I work in central London and I need to get to central London every day, but I live maybe 20 minutes out. So a good example of that would be, let me see. Let's say I live out in Walthamstow, somewhere like that, north end of London, and I need to get to the Square Mile every day. So I work in London, or maybe I need to get to Westminster a little bit further down the river. And so I am either going to take the tube, which is smelly and noisy and unreliable, and you have to deal with other people and COVID, I'm going to cycle, which is actually what I personally used to do. I used to live in Seven Sisters, so I was just down the road from Walthamstow. I used to cycle to my college in central London. I used to cycle to Clapham Junction once a week as well to do my job at the weekends. Or you're going to get a moped or a motorcycle because cars are just ridiculous in London. They take too long. if you know that you are going to be able to get from point A to point B and back again, and you don't have to stop to recharge, you don't have to stop about worrying about batteries, then great. But now I want to imagine that you live somewhere where you don't have access to your garden to park your vehicle in, or you don't have access to a charging station that you can plug your bike into. Then battery swap stations do provide a functionality. As I say, the other application that this would be great for would be for delivery services, pizza delivery vehicles. Believe it or not, and I don't want to assume that everybody who's watching this is a biker, and I don't want to assume that people who are watching it are not bikers. But I'm going to state some I think pretty well known facts. The motorcycles that deliver pizza are indestructible. They're generally things like the Honda Cubs, or they are maybe going to be like little Vespers, or they're going to be C90s or C50s or whatever. They're going to be lightweight. They are indestructible. You can throw them down, you can crash them, you can pick them up and just carry on. Is it Ed? I can't think of Ed's last name. Ed, I want to say Ed Marsh. I don't know if it is Ed Marsh. There's a guy called Ed. He's British. He's riding around the world on a Cub, on a C90. And it's bonkers because he can go places with that thing that a lot of more established adventure bikes would struggle with, because the thing is so light and chuckable and repairable. And so when you are using a motorcycle or a moped for an application that is primarily to get you from point A to point B as cheaply and as quickly as possible, you're not worried about carrying a large amount of stuff. And the pizza motorcycle delivery guys and girls are not using a huge amount of range. They might be going a mile or two down the road and coming back. And they don't carry huge numbers of pizzas on board unless there's one delivery with a large number of pizzas, because they're shuttling backwards and forwards all evening. Now, a battery swap model would be ideal for that kind of environment, because you come back to the station, to the pizza place, you swap your battery out once you've done an hour or two's worth of deliveries, you throw a new battery in and off you go. The benefits of having a better charged battery allows you to have a safer rider. They're not riding a big, heavy motorcycle. They're going to be able to get themselves, they're going to be able to be more flexible in traffic. And generally, again, I don't want to make generalizations, but generally, if you are doing motorcycle, moped delivery services, you're not someone who's been biking for long. You probably are not very experienced. You probably are not able to deal with a 600 or 700 pound bike. And those who are able to deal with 600 or 700 pound bikes are not people who are delivering pizza. And so being able to acknowledge that those two different segments exist and should coexist, I think is going to be a real challenge moving forwards. So those are my thoughts on the battery swaps. They're going to be good for tourist industries. They're going to be good for delivery services in heavily populated urban environments. I think they're going to be great for people who have short distances that they need to travel and who may not have at-home off-street parking and charging facilities. For them, being able to rent batteries, as long as those batteries have good battery management and they're well looked after, as one of you said, you'd be worried about putting a NAF battery in your bike. I would totally agree with you there. And I think, as some of you have also noted, it would be great for things like boats, off-board motors, outboard motors, even for boats or for other things. So that's going to be a real benefit. I think it's going to be a real bonus moving forwards. And as long as these companies come up with options that allow people to choose between a battery swap model or not, or the battery swap models are given a decent enough range that it is possible to operate them without having to rely on battery swaps. My biggest concern, or two biggest concerns, are proprietary system that could become expensive, and that having those batteries in a modular form means that the range of those vehicles is never going to be great. because you're going to have to specify the battery can be manually lifted in and out, or you have to go with a robotic battery swap scenario, which I detailed earlier on in the video, which would increase the cost of battery swaps, but also make it far, far harder to actually be able to swap it if anything went wrong with that battery swap technology. So there you are. Chris has come up with a very interesting example. Your electric motorcycle has its own internal batteries, then an extra swappable battery swap for extended range, and you can rent at a station. I like that very much, Chris. And maybe that is the way looking forwards. You know, you have, let's say we have 4 kilowatt hours tucked away in the bottom of the frame that you can't remove, but then you can add 2 kilowatt hours in a sled, and then another 2 kilowatt hours in a sled. That would work really well. I could see that working exceptionally well moving forwards. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to support us using Patreon. You can also send us Ko-fi, or you can send us Bitcoin if you would like to. You can also visit our swag store. That is over at Redbubble. We've got everything from face masks through to water bottles, hoodies, all kinds of things. So go and have a look. And if you fancy buying something, please go ahead and do so, because it really helps the channel. It really makes a big difference when we have people who are supporting the channel in that way. It makes it easier for us. So thanks very much. Thanks to our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. They are amazing. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons. That's John Lyons, Raging Fellows, Anonymous Freak, Paul Conway, Laura Sanborn, Anthony Coates, Sean Ueda, and Tazla in the Gong. And super shout out to our $100 a month Patreon supporters. Those are Marcel Ward, Jeffrey Songster, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback, Will Graylin, and Ian. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Thanks for joining the live stream. Let me know if you felt this live stream was better than our previous ones. We are trying to evolve, as the name suggests. Keep evolving.